Hello and welcome back to yet another awesome episode of Unscripted with Mike and Jeffrey. Today, we've got some interesting things on tap for you. We got the major signing of Case Cookus. We got the interesting look into the USFL college draft and some reaction on that. That happened yesterday. It looked like a big success. And you know how we do here on Unscripted. We giving you the XFL coverage that you didn't know you wanted, but now know you need. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, there's, a lot of stuff to talk about with these alternate football leagues, and a lot of people are excited, about these leagues. One's already begun, one hasn't started yet, but there's a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me as well. All right. So, the first two teams of their drafts here, we got the Memphis Showboats, the brand new team replacing the Tampa Bay Bandits. Mm-hmm. And the defending, undisputed USFL champion Birmingham Stallions. If you look at this list, look at these lists for these two teams, what picks stand out to you?
Well, I mean, a lot of these names, unfortunately, are, players that not a lot of people know of. I mean, obviously, the one that jumps off the page is Malik Cunningham, quarterback from Louisville. I'm sure Austin's happy about that. But, Birmingham, I mean, it's going to be interesting now that they got Malik Cunningham. Obviously, I think a lot of these players aren't playing, this season or whatever. I think they have, the rights, and it's they're going to have to work it all out. But, they have Jamar Smith, and now you got Malik Cunningham, potentially going to be out of the fold. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out for Birmingham there. But, I mean, there's, a lot of good players. Trey Shropshire, he was really good at UAB, really good receiver. So, I mean, there's just, not a lot of big names, but, just overall solid players. A lot of these players were from smaller schools. It's a lot of them even HBCU and Division II or FCS or whatever as well. So a lot of it's just, players that not a lot of people know of, but they have a lot of potential. And obviously they weren't going to get drafted more than likely. So that's what helps the USFL know that these players are at least going to want to play in this league.
Yes. I mean, to your point with HBCUs and all that, there have been 12 HBCU players drafted in this draft. So that's definitely huge. To your point, yes, most of the players picked in this draft were going to be your fifth round or lower, or actually fifth round or worse players. So obviously, for example, you said Malik Cunningham jumps off the page for Birmingham here. Well, as forgot to turn the freaking volume down. As decent or good as Cunningham is, that just goes to show that his value, his stock for the NFL currently is not very high. Because I mean, obviously, we didn't see the projected Stetson Bennett, Bryce Youngs, the Sean Clifford, those three. Oh, Max Duggan. We didn't even see Max Duggan. Those four were Bryce Young. Everyone was like, they should be funny and just do it. But the other three, it's
CJ Stroud. They're not going to do CJ Stroud, players like that.
Yeah. But because it was rumored at one point Max and Stetson and Sean could end up here because their projection is low enough, or it's almost borderline enough to where, okay, maybe. And I mean, that's the thing too. These players just want to just play. These QBs just want to just play. And it's not always necessarily about chasing that bag, so to speak.
Darius Days is another one as well. I think he was at TCU in college. He's a pretty notable name as well. It seems like Birmingham's got more of the notable names than Memphis does, but Memphis has a lot of like the underrated players. Brevin Allen was really good in college. So I mean, I just think overall both these teams have solid players, just not a lot of notable ones outside of Malik Cunningham being the obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I would definitely agree between these two. So the next two we got on deck is one of my, well, Memphis was one of my teams. One of my other teams got New Orleans and Houston. Now, if I'm looking at this, I'm seeing two teams here that are kind of like you got name poppers on both sides. You've got Isaiah Moore, linebacker. You got DJ Ivy, the corner, and Keaton Mitchell, the running back for New Orleans. To me, those are some big eye poppers. The big eye popper for Houston, in my eyes, is going to be Chase Bryce. Mm-hmm. And I just have to say this for obvious reasons, but Jeffrey Johnson.
That's funny. Yeah, on both these teams, I mean, Tyler Scott, he was a great receiver at Cincinnati, so that's a great addition for New Orleans. Mitchell, I thought that he was a player that would be in the NFL, and he still could be in the NFL draft. I mean, at East Carolina, he was lighting it up. That actually, oddly enough, the East Carolina-Cincinnati game was one of the best games, between the two teams all season. And, for both teams, that was their best game probably all year. Keaton Mitchell got hit really, badly in that game, and he got a concussion, but then he came back and he was still playing really well. But I think Tyler Scott and Keaton Mitchell are great players that have an NFL future for sure. And Jake Bobo, he was a wide receiver at UCLA. He is a pretty solid player. Probably not as well known as the other, two players, and probably wasn't as draftable, but still solid. Dante Stills was a good defensive lineman at West Virginia. There's a lot more notable names here than on the last, the last two teams. And then, again, with Houston, Chase Bryce, really good quarterback at App State. I mean, he had a journey. I mean, he played at Duke, Clemson, and then App State. He was all over the place just trying to find a home. And App State, he did good. He had turnover problems. That's why he's not in the NFL. He had way too many interceptions. If he had to cut down on the interceptions, then he would be in the NFL. But if he can show and prove that he's a quarterback that is, cleaned up the mistakes and can, have more successful plays versus negative plays in the future, then I think he has a shot in the NFL. Jeffrey Johnson was a great defensive lineman at Oklahoma, which, I mean, if you're playing for Oklahoma, you're probably really good. And overall, both these teams just have solid players. And I think that, this draft, as long as these players do end up playing for these two teams, both teams did a really good job with their additions.
Agreed. I definitely see probably most of these guys playing. Chase Bryce, probably most likely for sure. And with the Chase Bryce pick, they did fill a hole that was desperately needed for Houston. So our next two are my other favorite team in the league, the Pittsburgh Maulers and the Michigan Panthers. Now, if we look over the list here for Pittsburgh, you've got Lindsey Scott Jr. at quarterback. You've got CJ Turner, a wide receiver. For me, other than that, I'm not seeing a name on Pittsburgh that pops out. And for Michigan, Santrell Latham, I think, a name that kind of pops. Jim Okorafor, Michigan's 9th round pick there, for me kind of pops out. Definitely heavily needed on the O-line, and the dude is just massive and just a beast at the offensive line. Oh, I almost completely forgot, and I'm looking right at it. The big pickup for Michigan is that round 2 pick, Tanner Morgan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think overall, you look at these two teams. I think getting Lindsey Scott Jr. for the Maulers is an interesting pick. He played at Incarnate Word, which I think is, interesting. It's an FCS program. And oddly enough, Cameron Ward, who is now at Washington State, at quarterback, also played at Incarnate Word. So, I mean, they obviously have some pretty good quarterbacks at that school, which is awesome. And like you said, CJ Turner, that's a good addition. But Michigan, I think Michigan did a really good job because you got Tanner Morgan. And yes, he's to me exactly like Chase Bryce, even though he played at Minnesota and Chase Bryce was at App State, but they're turnover prone. And that's why Tanner Morgan's here. If Tanner Morgan, had been able, if he was able to go to the draft or could have gone to the draft, or whatever, just chose to after that 2019 season. I don't know if he was eligible that year. After that year, he would have been a pretty hot pick because he was throwing the ball to Rashad Bateman. There was another receiver too. I can't remember his name, but those two guys, I mean, they were lighting it up that year. And that's when Minnesota beat Auburn in the like the Peach Bowl or Citrus Bowl, one of those bowl games like that. So overall, Tanner Morgan was a quarterback, had a great season, and then he just kind of declined. And part of it was because his offensive coordinator left after that season, and Minnesota did not have the weapons on offense that they used to have. So his production declined overall, but he's still a capable quarterback. And I think if he can regain his 2019 form, he could be an NFL quarterback. But it's been 3 or 4 years since that season, so he's going to have to return to form. I think it's really good that Michigan got 4 offensive linemen in this draft because they needed it. Their offensive line was awful last year, and getting offensive linemen that are all really solid, I think is going to help out Michigan overall with whoever's at quarterback. Gunnar Oaks, he was a really good tight end at Eastern Michigan. Not a lot of people know about him, but he's an underrated player. And again, that's why, you get guys like this that you've never really heard of before pop up in these leagues and end up playing really well. I think he's a guy to watch. But overall, I think both teams did well. But I really like Michigan's selections.
Yeah, to your point, I completely agree. Michigan's selections look a lot stronger as far as drafting needs instead of wants or like big namers. But yes, the fact that Lindsey Scott came from Incarnate Word, definitely it's huge for Pittsburgh to do that, and hopefully he does get some time. I'm sure he won't be the starter, which stinks, but I mean, if he gets a chance to prove himself, definitely go out and prove yourself. But yeah, I mean, great drafts overall. Definitely, if we graded this, I would grade Michigan's better for sure, like you said. But still, overall, just great for these two. So the next two that we've got are the 2022 North Division Championship game, the New Jersey Generals and the Philadelphia Stars. Now here we go. Now we're starting to get bigger names here. Adrian Martinez at New Jersey for sure, huge. Let's see, Jermaine McDaniel Jr., edge rusher. That's got to be big. J.J. Holman for New Jersey. You look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I'm not really seeing much, but I mean, what's your take on these two?
Well, I mean, you look at, obviously, like you said, I mean, Adrian Martinez is going to, pop off the page because everybody remembers him at Nebraska and just waiting for him to break out and, potentially, be the best quarterback or at least one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten. It never happened, and a lot of it was for a lot of different reasons. Poor offensive line play from Nebraska. They're snapping the balls over his head. Poor play calling, and he was turnover prone himself. And overall just was a mess at Nebraska. He transfers to Kansas State, and he does better, but he still struggles because he got benched for Will Howard midseason. So I thought he played better at Kansas State, but it wasn't good enough for him to keep starting job. So again, he's going to have to, find consistency in this league if he's going to be, a potential NFL quarterback, because the talent's there, the athleticism's there. It's the consistency that's the problem for Adrian Martinez. And I mean, you look at some of the other players. I mean, Adam Corsack, great punter at Rutgers. And you always want a good punter. I know a lot of people don't like drafting a punter because it's like, why are you drafting a punter? You can just get him after the fact. But if you like a punter and you need it, and he's really good, then I think it's still a good pick, even though you usually apply drafting skill position players over a punter. But I think that's a good pick. They also picked a long snapper out of Purdue and Nick Zacchino. That's an interesting pick as well. Again, why are you drafting a long snapper? A lot of people would say, but if he's really good at what he does, I don't see an issue with it. Because at least it shores up those positions where you're not going to have problems there. And then with Philadelphia, I mean, Jose Ramirez was a really good defensive end at Eastern Michigan. So, I mean, even though, again, kind of like, a lot of these other picks, like Gunnar Oaks, also from Eastern Michigan, not a big name. Not many people know who they are, but they were really good. The MAC does have good players. You just have to find them. Truman Jones is a good defensive end. Overall, I think both teams did a solid job. Not as many big names here. I mean, there's not like a lot of well-known players, but you still have Adrian Martinez, and you've got a lot of diamond in the rough players that are going to be probably really solid in the USFL.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I mean, with your point with Adrian, it's like, USFL is basically there as like an NFL buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you possibly have the NFL qualities, but you're not quite there yet. It's not, just give up on your dream now. It's go to the USFL and try to develop and tweak what you have, so that, eventually you're going to get that call.
Mm-hmm.
So, XFL kicked off this past weekend. Heck of a weekend. Great games. And, let's talk about it. So, first we got the first game. The Vegas Vipers and the Dallas, my gosh, that's 2020. The Arlington Renegades, not the Dallas Renegades. Arlington came out on top. Absolutely did not deserve it, in my opinion. But things happened, and Luis Perez just kind of fell apart under the pressure. Threw 2 picks in the second half, and Vegas disappeared. Scored a late touchdown to make it respectable.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. What's your thoughts?
I mean, like you said, this was a game that Vegas controlled in the first half. They looked like they were going to roll to victory, and, that we were going to be questioning what Bob Stoops was going to have to do to figure out a way to get the Arlington Renegades back on track. But out of nowhere, the script flipped, and Vegas went from, dominating to falling apart. Like you said, Luis Perez threw 2 pick sixes, which was the difference. Because as we've, well documented before in the past when we did, our show the other night, you look at Drew Plitt, he didn't even really play that well. He had a pick himself, but it wasn't a pick six. And he only threw for like 160 yards. It's not like he lit it up. And Arlington overall didn't have much on offense, but 2 pick sixes is costly. And it's really tough to win a game like that, especially when you don't put up a lot of points yourself. So the 2 pick sixes were the difference, helped Arlington get over the top, but they definitely, can enjoy this win. But if they're going to want to win more games in the future, they can't bank on 2 pick sixes to win. They're going to have to find more offense. And for Vegas, you don't turn the ball over. Luis Perez get back to being, the king of the USFL, the XFL, and all these alternate leagues like he's been in the past, and Vegas should be okay.
For sure. And then you're just going to need, your receiving core and just the surrounding players to step up. And
for sure.
I think, for first game, Montez Bryant did pretty good. So the night capper for night one was Houston Roughnecks stomping an absolute mud hole into the Orlando Guardians, and they just basically controlled the game from start to finish. I mean, we could break this down even more than we did on Sunday, but at the end of the day, there's only one thing people really talk about when it comes to this game, and I think we both kind of know what it is because we did talk for like 10 minutes about it on the show. Whether it was a catch or an interception, we'll never know 100%. I mean, they ended up calling it a touchdown, but like we debated on the show, it could have been an interception, but they went touchdown because that's what they called on the field. Brandon Silvers looked really good. Didn't look like he missed a beat. Cole McDonald, when they brought him in for the 2-point conversions or the extra points conversions, he looked really good running the offense. I know the biggest thing for him was just the run around the side, the run around the end to get into the end zone. But I mean, I think there's a big potential there for a possible QB battle in Houston. And I would almost wonder if maybe Houston trades away Cole McDonald if the season lasts. Because I know that's a big thing going around right now with all the ratings and attendance and everybody freaking out, being worried. It's like, just calm down.
I mean, if you wanted to succeed, support the league, man. I mean, that's the way I see it. If you wanted to succeed, all you gotta do is watch the game, show up to the games, and there you go. It won't fail.
And if you have the money, buy the merch, of course. But I mean, this game was really hard for me to watch. After a certain point,
it was not a very good game. That's why.
After a certain point, it would just, okay, Houston's going to win, but how much are they going to win by? Like, it kept my interest because I wanted to see, okay, is Houston going to cover the over-under by themselves? Because it was 34. So they almost did it. Freaking, it was nice seeing Wade Phillips, too, back finally, for sure. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think overall with this game, I mean, to your point, I think the biggest problem with, like these leagues when a game's bad is the ratings. Because you think about college football or the NFL where you have other options to watch. Like if you have 4 games on at the same time and one game's bad, you just flip it to the next game. Well, with these leagues, there's one game on at one time. And if that game's a blowout, people turn it off, unfortunately, because it's a blowout. And this game was bad because, thanks Clint Moses for showing. I know 3Bs are in the XFL for sure. I mean, it definitely is awesome when you get to watch these leagues. And that's a big draw for these leagues is when you get to watch, former players from the teams you like being in these leagues as well. But overall, I mean, this game just showed that Orlando has the worst quarterbacks. And that was the question that me and you were talking about before the season started. We were like, Orlando could be good if they can get the quarterback situation figured out, which me and you both said we felt DeAndre Francois should have been the guy. But for whatever reason, he didn't dress, he didn't play. So it is what it is on that. And, Paxton Lynch, for whatever reason, just cannot, live up to his potential. He did pretty good at Memphis. He got drafted for his size, which is why I always say that I don't think that you should be drafted for your size. You should be drafted for how good you actually are. And Paxton Lynch was clearly only drafted in the first round because he was 6'7", and he had a big arm. Because he just does not show the skills of a QB. He's not quick enough to escape the pocket. He's so big that he's an easy target to get sacked. And he doesn't make quick enough decisions. So overall, he's just a mountain of a guy in the pocket that's so easily able to be sacked. And he panics and he throws bad passes. Overall, I just don't see a future for Paxton Lynch playing at the quarterback position anywhere, unless it's a league that's just so bad that he can see over everybody and just throw it to receivers that are wide open. Like, he could play in the Pro Bowl. That's the thing. The Pro Bowl was so bad with the way that was set up, with how easy it was for Geno Smith to throw balls to players because there was no one on him for like 15 yards. Yeah, Paxton Lynch could play in that. But other than that, actual football, I like Paxton Lynch a lot. I really want you to succeed, but I just don't see a future for him. It just isn't working out. And Quentin Dormady wasn't much better. His accuracy at times was actually decent. He had a couple of good throws, but then he threw a couple bad throws. So he was inconsistent. So if Orlando doesn't get the quarterback situation figured out, then Cody Latimer, Charleston Rambo, they're all going to go to waste. It's not even going to matter. You've got great receivers, and you're not even going to be able to get the ball to them. Houston, like you said, it was awesome to see Wade Phillips because he's like 75 years old and out there and coaching. Again, it was hilarious when the commentator was like, oh, man, Wade Phillips is spilling all the secrets while being mic'd up. It was hilarious. You got to be careful. It was funny. And overall, Houston dominated on both sides of the ball. And like you said, Brandon Silvers played a lot better than a lot of people were expecting him to. So overall, it was a great game for Houston and an awful game for Orlando because they just can't get the quarterback situation figured out. And they better hope DeAndre Francois can come in and start playing for them, playing well, because other than that, it's going to be a long season if they don't get anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. But I think Orlando can already see definitely time to move on from Paxton Lynch.
I mean, to be honest, you probably shouldn't have signed him in the first place. And again, it's nothing against Paxton Lynch because, again, I really want you to succeed. But, I mean, he failed in all the other leagues. He's not – you really think that this league is going to be the one where he finally plays well? The USFL, and yes, Michigan's offensive line was bad, as I documented earlier. That's why they got all those offensive linemen. But overall, he's just not quick enough to escape pressure. And he's so big, he's easy to sack. It's just the way it is. I mean, if he was made quicker decisions and was able to scramble like Trevor Lawrence more, then I think he could be really good. But he just doesn't have that. And he was able to succeed at Memphis because it was a smaller conference, and they had good weapons on the outside, and that's why he succeeded.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, to your point, it's like he's a taller Trevor Lawrence, basically.
He reminds me of Brock.
Well, he's a slower Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Paxton Lynch and Brock Osweiler are really similar. And Brock Osweiler didn't make it either, unfortunately.
Sometimes, these smaller school QBs are hit and miss, I mean, because if you look like at Joe Flacco, that's a big hit right there. Super Bowl champion. But for whatever reason, Osweiler and Paxton Lynch, who coincidentally both played for the Broncos after Peyton Manning.
And Clint Moses says, he's got one player running back for DC from Oregon State, and then you got an offensive line for Orlando. Well, I mean, he wasn't giving Paxton enough time, or Paxton wasn't getting the ball out quick enough because it was ugly for sure.
All right. Now let's talk about the big Sunday games. Man, we're almost half a week past. Actually, we are half a week past from these games, and I'm still pumped over this. This game, we have talked about all of these games endlessly, and I love this game specifically. I love both Sunday games, but this game specifically was outstanding. Yes, a lot of it hinges on the last 2 minutes of the game, as Edward likes to point out, because that's when AJ decided, I'm going to be prime Alabama QB again, and just torches San Antonio. All game he was just and then all of a sudden it's like something clicked in his head, and it's like, you're done. Jack Cohn, I kind of felt like we would see that kind of performance from Jack Cohn just because first professional start technically, and he just came out of college. So the potential's definitely there. He looked pretty good. He looked a lot better, in my opinion, than McCarron until the last 2 minutes of the game. But still, I mean, nothing really, explosive, high-powered about any of these games, really. A lot of the outcomes for this week's games had depended on the defense in the long run. So, Penny, for your thoughts?
I mean, I think overall this game, like you said, I mean, Edward, he's right. I mean, he might be throwing shade a little bit at McCarron and, Alabama and everything, but it doesn't matter. He's right. This game was not good until the end because A.J. McCarron was terrible. I mean, he looked like a guy that you're questioning why he's still playing football. And then the script flipped and he started playing really well. And it was nice to see because A.J. McCarron was a solid player. I mean, he was at Alabama, and the reason why a lot of people like A.J. McCarron and Greg McElroy when they were at Alabama, because that was before Alabama became dominant. Once Alabama became dominant, that's when the love for the quarterbacks waned because it was just a recurring thing every year. That's why a lot of people like these two. That's just the way I see it. But A.J. McCarron, I mean, he had, a pretty decent NFL career. He never really was a starter for long. He was at the Bengals and he played some. And, when Andy Dalton got hurt or went down, and, he was not bad, but he wasn't, elite either. So I think overall it's nice to see him in this league to be able to play football again. And he proved in the last, 4 minutes of that, or 2 to 4 minutes of that game, that he still got it. He's still capable. And I think that the rules of the 4th and 15, giving you a shot to go for a 4th and 15 to pick it up instead of doing an onside kick, it gives more teams opportunities to have, a chance to come back. And some people like that, some people don't. Because again, if you like a team being able to have a chance to come back, then you're going to like this rule. If you're a person that wants the team that's winning to win the game, then you don't like the rule. It just depends on what you see. If you just like entertainment and, wow, St. Louis came back. But if this was the NFL rules, they more likely don't come back because they kick it onside, don't get it, and then San Antonio wins. But overall, it was a great game. Like you said, with Jack Cohn, he was rusty. I think he, is really solid quarterback, and he'll start playing better as the season goes along. But St. Louis did get bailed out by the rules of the XFL, and A.J. McCarron woke up in the last couple minutes of the game, and he played really well. And to Clint Moses' point, play defense if you want to win. I think overall you can make a big argument, with a lot of these teams that their defenses have been good, the teams that have won, but it's also been the team on offense that makes the mistakes. Because Vegas clearly wins the game over Arlington if Louis Perez doesn't throw 2 pick sixes. So it's also the mistakes of the offense. Kind of plays hand in hand.
Yep, absolutely. So, for the last game of the night for the week, we saw DC almost get run out of their own stadium against Seattle, which is crazy because Ben DiNucci didn't even play that well. Realistically, he didn't. The defense has stepped up and really helped. And I think, as funny as it is to say, the big tide turner had to be the taking away the beer snake and fans throwing lemons on the field. As far as the actual play, though, neither quarterback that played for DC looked very good. Jordan Teamu had a touchdown
right there, basically.
He had a touchdown, but it was a running touchdown. Derek King, I think, had a touchdown, but it was a running touchdown. I mean, you've got the run game. You need to find the balanced quarterback. You need to – because the thing is like, okay, so in XFL 2.0, Jordan Teamu played for A.J. McCarron's team, the St. Louis Battlehawks. And he was average to okay with them. And you're starting to see that that's just kind of how he is, and, which it does stink because in college he was a pretty good player. And I just worry that with these guys that are not too far out of college, like AJ McCarron gets an exception because he has been out of college for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, Teamu, not very long. And Jack Cohn, fresh out, so he gets the exception. It's like, I hate to say this, but I think these guys peaked in college as far as success, playing good, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we look at the other side, with Ben DiNucci, you had Ben, you got Josh Gordon finally coming back, so you got the headline there. You got the running back out of Marshall. I forget what his name was. He played decent. Ben DiNucci, for a long bit of the game, DC was making Ben DiNucci look like freaking Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, floor is yours.
I think overall you look at, when you talk about quarterbacks like Jordan, Teamu or De'Aaron King, that's why Malik Cunningham right now has been drafted to the, USFL. Because when you have a quarterback that can run, that's a great talent to have, to use your legs and get scores. But you have to be able to throw the football, because that's like the biggest knock against Lamar Jackson right now, with the Ravens, because he's a supreme athlete, but it's about throwing the ball consistently. You have to be able to do both. If you can't do both at a high level, then it is really tough to be a quarterback in the National Football League. You look at Cam Newton as an example. He was huge. And, I mean, he was just Mack trucking everybody. But it caught up with him eventually. But a lot of these guys, like Lamar Jackson, Malik Cunningham, they're not like Cam Newton build-wise. They're not going to be able to take the hits forever. I mean, that's why, again, Lamar Jackson hasn't even finished the season hardly ever. That's why everybody's saying, well, he doesn't have a great postseason record. Well, he's barely been in the postseason. So I think overall with quarterbacks like this, they're flawed because they're playing a position that the primary thing that you're supposed to do is throw the football. You're not supposed to run more than you throw as a quarterback. Khalil Tate was a legend at Arizona, but he got hurt, and then he wasn't as, flashy running the ball as he was before. He goes to the NFL, they move him to wide receiver, you never hear from him again. They moved him to wide receiver because of the fact he wasn't a good enough thrower. Antoine Randall was elite in Indiana back in the late 90s, early 2000s. He goes to the NFL, he was moved to receiver for the Steelers, had the great play in the Super Bowl. You just look at these type players. They're really good, but they're not good enough at throwing the ball consistently. That's why they're in these leagues like this. If Jordan Teamu and De'Aaron King and Malik Cunningham can prove that they can throw the ball at a consistent level, in these leagues, they'll be in the NFL in a heartbeat. But like you said, both of these quarterbacks had a rushing touchdown in this game. Neither of them had a passing touchdown. And that's not going to, be good for their success if they want to be in the NFL. If they want to continue to put up good numbers in, this league and play in this league, they're not going to get benched in this league. You're not going to get kicked out of this league because they're great athletes, but they're never going to be in the NFL because they just aren't good enough at passing the football. It's almost like today, the perfect quarterback to people today is not Tom Brady, even though to me a true quarterback is Tom Brady, a guy that throws the football, perfectly, dropping dimes, to receivers down the field like Mike Evans, like he was this past season. That's the correct quarterback. But to people today, the perfect quarterback is Patrick Mahomes because he's a great runner and he's a great passer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to find that, though. You can only have so many because you look at a quarterback, and a lot of people aren't going to know who he is, but Nate Sudfeld played out of Indiana in college. He's with the backup with Detroit Lions. He can't run. He's like a 1980s quarterback. Can't move. He's like Tom Brady, but he literally can't move at all. And he's a pretty good passer, but he don't play. He's a backup because he's a solid passer, but he can't run. A lot of these quarterbacks today, they want the mobility, but they also want the passing too. It's just tough to get both. But I mean, I know that completely went off the rails and not talking about this game at all. But this game was a good game, but the quarterback play was poor on both sides of the ball. Both teams not great on passing. Both these teams, if they want to win well in this league, are going to have to get better play from their, the quarterback position. And like you said, with Seattle, you got Josh Gordon. You don't want him to go to waste. And overall, I think both these teams are going to have success, but especially for the DC defenders, Derek King or Jordan Teamu, whoever's going to be the primary starting quarterback, has to throw the ball better. Because if not, DC might win some games, but they're never going to be in the NFL, and that's what their goal is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could strive to win an XFL championship all you want, but not going to get you anywhere if you're not playing better than just enough to win the chip.
You have to do the things necessary for yourself to be able, to make the league that you want to be in.
Absolutely. All right, so our favorite time. We got the week 2 schedule in front of us here. Let's pick some games. All right, so first game this week, we got St. Louis versus Seattle, 9 o'clock on FX.
And hopefully enough people have FX to be able to watch this game. I think, a lot of people who love sports, they probably have a package deal where FX is squeaked in there, but hopefully a lot of people will be able to watch this game. You look at this game here, you got St. Louis, you've got A.J. McCarron, and he was cold as ice for the first 3 quarters of that game, but he woke up. He thawed out, and he started, using that arm, and he was slinging it down the field. If that carries over to this game, they're going to win because you have the better quarterback on your team. Seattle, Ben DiNucci, I mean, again, he didn't play that well. But they got Josh Gordon, so if he can just find a way to get the ball to him, then maybe, he could look better. I think Seattle, overall played fairly well. I mean, like you said, the lemons was the turning point in that game. As long as there's no lemons going on, maybe Seattle won't be, cursed or whatever. They lose every game because some lemons are thrown on the field. So, I mean, maybe they'll be able to win. It's at home for them this time. But I think overall, I feel that if A.J. McCarron carries over his success at the end of last game, it carries over to this game for a full game. Now, we haven't seen that, but there's a really good shot that it does. I'll take St. Louis to beat Seattle 27-24.
Okay. For me, like you said, a lot hinges with A.J. McCarron. Little fun fact, it's projected to be like 21 degrees at kickoff, and there's already like a few inches of snow on the field, which could definitely play a factor. I still don't think Seattle's proven enough. Now, neither team is really proven. It all hinges on what if this, what if this, what if this. Well, if I've learned anything from constantly picking against Bama, New England Patriots, New York Yankees, the big, since LeBron went to the Lakers, I don't really pick against the Lakers, but, the big franchises or the franchise stars. Well, in this case, St. Louis has your big-time star. I'm going to have to go with St. Louis. But erring on the side of caution with everything, I'm going to say St. Louis wins 20-18.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point on the weather. I didn't really think about that with the snow and the cold and everything. But if it is snowing, that is going to complicate things for sure. But I don't necessarily – the thing that makes it different, though, is that these players on Seattle are not built for this because not every player on the team is used to that. Some of these guys could be from the South anyway. So I don't really think it really helps either team. That's the argument there. Didn't think about it, but if you really look at it, it's not going to really help or hurt either team unless the players are used to this. If they're a player from Ohio State or something that is used to the snow, there's going to be players that are from Texas. There's going to be players from Florida that have never played in the cold weather. So it's gonna be a struggle bus for both teams.
Really, Edward? I mean, he's not wrong, but come on, really?
But the point of Buckeye Mike is that he is the biggest star name in the league. I mean, if you're going to say this is the guy that everyone at least knows who this is, it's A.J. McCarron. It's not Cody Latimer. It's not Josh Gordon, the receivers. As much as you want to say that, or, it's not any of these guys. It's going to be A.J. McCarron. He's the big name.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when everybody was going crazy when Bo Scarborough was announced to Birmingham last year in the midseason. It's like, oh, man, Bo Scarborough is playing for Birmingham. It's Alabama to Alabama. It's like it's just the star name.
He balled out, though.
Mm-hmm.
So on Saturday at 7 o'clock on FX again, you've got the DC Defenders traveling to Vegas, playing the Vegas Vipers, where? In Allegiant Stadium. Big mistake.
Way too many empty seats.
Yes.
Like 65,000. It's like when they play UNLV games there, and there's no one there. It's funny.
Yes. I mean, it's going to look bad on TV. It's going to bring the ratings down. The attendance, I hope the attendance is really good. Is your key home crowds to get good attendance is going to be San Antonio, Vegas, and St. Louis.
It's not going to be Orlando.
No. Not after the week 1 performance. The only way they'll get a good show out. Well, I will say they may get a good show out this week just because it's the first home game.
Yes.
But they're going to have to win by a decent margin to continue to bring the crowds in.
I agree.
As far as this game, though, I mean, I'm kind of struggling with this game just because of the quarterback play. I mean, are we going to get the first half Louis Perez, and can Louis play an entire game the way he played that first half against Arlington?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to get a revamped college version of Derek King or Jordan Teamu? That's going to be the main thing. I think Louis is more reliable in this case because of only having to tweak a little bit, whereas Teamu has to tweak a lot. So I'm going to go Vegas in this one. Give me Vegas 34, DC 24.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of the angle I was taking as well. I was, going to take, that Louis Perez is the more reliable quarterback. He had a bad game with the 2 pick sixes. They were horrible. But with DC, you don't have a reliable QB, especially through the air. You're going to get the running game from both if they both play again, but they're not going to be reliable at passing. They're not going to pass reliably in this game, more than likely, unless somehow one of the two just starts actually probably more is going to be Jordan Teamu if it does happen, where he's going to start passing well. Because, I mean, he did have moments at Ole Miss. He had moments where he was a good passer, but not as consistent as Louis Perez. I mean, again, the home court advantage, home field advantage, it benefits Vegas because overall, I mean, you're at home, you're going to have the fans on your side, even if it is a half-empty stadium. Again, I think Louis Perez is going to shake, off the rust from that game. I'm going to go Vegas as well, 28-22.
Okay. So to close out the week, we got 2 games on Sunday. We got 4 o'clock on Sunday on ESPN. San Antonio traveling all the way to Orlando to play the Guardians. I think for the most part, this one's kind of easy for me just because we don't know if Francois will play or not. Now, if Francois plays for Orlando, I'm going to take Orlando all day long. But because we don't know, San Antonio, to me, I don't know about you, but San Antonio, to me, is a safer bet just based on the performance we got from Orlando last week and having Paxton Lynch play. Now, if Dormady plays a whole game, it could be different too. They may not even need Francois per se and just have Dormady be the starter. But that's the thing too that I question is like, okay, if Dormady starts,
if I lose money on these XFL bets on y'all, hey Clint, I'm not a professional here, man.
me either. I don't even know what the spreads are. I didn't even think about that. But the big question to me is if they go ahead and try to start Dormady and somehow pull a magic rabbit out of their hat and win the game, and Dormady plays decent enough, does it cause Orlando to make Francois the backup and cut Paxton and make Dormady the starter? So with that being said, of San Antonio being more reliable, I still think you're going to get low scoring here. I mean, if you compare, I know it's a bad example and you can't really do it that way, but if you compare the week 1 scores and just insert them here, you're looking at 15-12. Now, obviously, they've had time to tweak things by now, but I still think it's going to be low and close. I'm going to say 20-15, San Antonio.
Yeah, I literally agree with you that with Orlando, it's who's at quarterback. If it's Paxton Lynch, you're losing. If it's Quentin Dormady, it's possible you win if he plays well because he did have moments, but he's not reliable either. It's possible that he could be. DeAndre Francois, I think, gives you the best shot to win, but we haven't seen him yet, and that's the problem because he didn't play last week. So it'd be his first game, and would he be ready? So overall, if you're Orlando, if Quentin Dormady's not the guy, DeAndre Francois is not able to play, and Paxton Lynch isn't it, then you gotta get another quarterback. And there's so many players out there you could get. Just get another quarterback if you want to save your season. I think it's funny that this is the game that's on ESPN2 because they're both 0-1, which is kind of funny as well. But still people probably gonna watch. Hopefully Orlando gets a good crowd, and for Orlando, hopefully they win, like you said, so they can keep fans interested. Because again, Cody Latimer, Charleston Rambo deserve a good quarterback. They deserve somebody to throw the ball to, and they're both really good. But overall, I think that if Orlando, like you said, has, whoever the quarterback is, plays well, they're going to win this game. But since we can't rely on that, I'll take San Antonio as well over Orlando 17-14.
All right. So the last game of the week to close out week 2, we've got the big battle of Texas, part 1. 7:00 on ESPN2, you've got Arlington Renegades at Houston Roughnecks. Now, with this, I think
this should be the ESPN game right here.
For sure. So with this one, I think Brandon Silvers looked really good last week. I think he can carry it. Hopefully he can carry it over. I think he can to this week. You're looking at a little bit better of a defense in Arlington, but not by much, if you ask me. It's not that hard defensively to be better than Orlando with the cruddy performance we got last week. That was horrendous. If you think it's bad offensively, you only put up 12 points. Defensively, you gave up 33. Yikes. So I look to see, for one, who's going to be the starter for Houston. I would personally go with Silvers. like he did last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like I said, McDonald has started to prove himself, but Silver's played awesome. I don't see a reason yet why to swap him.
Mm-hmm.
For Arlington, in my case, I would look at possibly doing a switch at QB instead of Plitt. Bring in their other well-known quarterback. I forget who it is.
Kyle
But,
Sloter.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Bring in Slaughter and see what he does and see how he can do. That job is totally up for grabs, just like Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be, I would say, give Slaughter a chance just because, it's going to be it's got to be back and forth on offense with Arlington because of how easily and quickly Houston can score and how they can turn it on its head and go slow. So I'm going to go Houston in this one. I think it'll be closer than last week, but I still think it'll be the one blowout game of the week, which I did predict a blowout game last week. I had the wrong game. I'm going to go Houston 40, Arlington 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if Drew Plitt's the quarterback for Arlington, they're not going to have enough offense to keep up with Houston. Even if they turn Houston over, more likely you're not going to have 2 pick sixes. So you're not going to have those points. If Kyle Sloter plays, I think it's possible that they could win, but still more than unlikely, because if you're Houston, if Brandon Silver starts playing bad, you can just bring in Cole McDonald. He's proven to. So I think either way you go with Houston, they're going to have more offense in this game than Arlington. And even if Arlington, plays really good on defense and turns them over a couple times, as long as they're not 2 pick sixes, they're not going to win. So I'm going to go with Houston to beat Arlington 28-24. We basically are agreeing here on every game because, I mean, you feel like all of these games are going to go this way. I mean, obviously, if I had to pick one game to be wrong, it's probably the St. Louis one because of the possibility of the cold. You don't know how McCarron's going to play. It could be, DC beating Vegas, but I think feel pretty confident about all these picks. So, like I said, I got Houston 28-24 over Arlington.
Nice. So before we go into the main story of the show, how do you feel about these games being on FX? Do you think it will hurt viewership, hurt the league? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I've kind of, slightly joked about it, several times because it's like FX isn't a sports channel, usually with football. I've never seen a game on the network before for football. So it's like if people have the network and they keep promoting it, like if you're on ESPN and they're saying, oh, this game's on FX and people have the channel and they want to watch, then they'll go over and watch. That's what I'm going to do. But if people don't have the channel, then you can't watch. And for a lot of people, they just watch ESPN2, ABC, the main channels. It's just, they're not going to scroll for it. So it just depends. I mean, I think if they promote it enough and enough people have FX, which I'm sure a lot of people do. Like if you have cable, you're going to have FX. If you got some streaming services, you're going to have FX. But not everyone has it. So I don't know if it's going to hurt completely. But, I mean, I remember the Alliance of American Football. For example, when they started that league, they were putting the games on CBS and Fox. I think those are the 2 networks that it was on. And then over time, they started putting more of the games on CBS Sports Network and FS1 as the season went along. And there was barely any more games on CBS and Fox. To me, that's just not good because of the fact more people are going to watch on CBS and Fox than they are on those 2 networks. That a lot of people don't have FS1 or CBS Sports Network. Some people do, but some people don't. And you're limiting your reach when you put more of these games on networks that people don't have or don't want to watch games on. So overall, I don't think it's going to hurt terribly as long as they don't overdo it with it. I think the USFL did a pretty good job of putting a lot of the games on NBC and Fox, but they also were putting games on FS1 and USA Network, which is affiliated with NBC, and they were putting games on Peacock, which to me was the worst because people are getting Peacock to watch movies and TV. They're not getting Peacock to watch USFL games. So people didn't watch those games if they don't have Peacock. So overall, I just think with these leagues, limit the amount of games on these alternate networks and streaming services, because if you overdo it, you're hurting your viewership overall in the long run, because people, what if someone likes one team or one quarterback and that game's on FX, like with AJ McCarron? That's the game you probably should have on ESPN. The ratings for that game with St. Louis last week were the best one, and you're putting that game on FX. It's like you're trying to test it to see if people are still going to watch on an alternate network when you shouldn't test it. You put the worst game on the alternate network if you're going to do it. I mean, to me, what would have been a better option, since all these games are on ESPN and ABC, is put St. Louis and Seattle on ESPNU. If you want to do that, you could, if you want to put it on ESPNU, even though that game should be on ESPN and it should be San Antonio and Orlando on ESPNU. But overall, since all these games are not colliding with each other, all on at different times, if ESPN didn't want to allow it, I guess, but you could have put all these games on ESPN anyway. Because, I mean, I think like Thursday night on ESPN, you might have a basketball game, but then you could put it on ESPN2 or U, but it might interfere with basketball, college basketball, so that's probably why it's on FX. But overall, it's just confusing. I mean, you could have put it on ABC, but I don't know. I mean, you also have to compete with reality shows that are on ABC. So I get why it's on FX. I get it. But a lot of people don't have it. And a lot of people aren't going to watch it on the network. And when the ratings come out, the two games that are going to perform the best are the ESPN and ESPN2 games. The FX games are going to perform the worst. It's just the way it is. So
Now,
you got to limit the amount of games that are on there so more people can watch and stay interested in it.
Which if you look at the schedule, they don't really do. I mean, because there's not another game that like I could watch from my house until week 6. It's one ABC game. Half of the games for weeks 2 through 5 are on FX, and I think that's a big mistake to your point. If you want to fix the mistake, I would suggest figuring out a way to simulcast the games, have it on 2 different channels. Now, yes, technically someone's argument could be, well, they already do simulcast it because you can watch every single game on ESPN Plus. Well, guess what? Not everybody has ESPN Plus or can afford ESPN Plus.
That's the other problem. I mean, we're basically at a point where there's so many streaming services. There's all these streaming platforms now. You got your Peacocks, your Paramount Pluses, your Disney Pluses, and Amazon Primes and ESPN Plus. It's just as much as you're trying to make it simpler for people to watch stuff, you're also making it harder because some people can't afford all this stuff or want to afford all this stuff. It's just a lot easier if everything was on ESPN and their networks, Fox, CBS, and NBC and ABC. It makes a lot more sense if it was like that instead of it being everything else. I know why all this other stuff's being done. We know why at the end of the day. I mean, money, you spread it around more. It makes sense. And I mean, ESPN Plus is a good thing because you have a lot of games, especially on like Saturdays, where there's just so many good games on that you have to put some games on ESPN Plus. But when you're putting these games on there, like you said, if people don't have it, they're not going to watch it. I mean, if you have ESPN Plus, it's great. But if you don't have ESPN Plus, then it stinks. Because there's going to be a lot of people that don't have FX or ESPN Plus. They're not going to watch either game. It's just the way it is. But hopefully it doesn't hurt the XFL too much. And I hope that at the end of the day that the league will be able to continue. But just try to find a way to not have too many of these games on FX. Because if you do, then I think it's going to hurt the ratings in the long run.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, if you really have to have games on FX, to your point, look at each game each week Designate the worst game to be on FX. It's the easiest way to do it. And right now, it's probably, unless the other team that they're playing is really good, it's probably going to be the Orlando game or the Seattle game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what, like, college basketball has this problem. And I've said it before. You look at scheduling in college basketball where you got, these games scheduled in the preseason based on what you think the teams are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky, Florida's on ESPN tonight. Obviously, it's the All-Star break, so there's no NBA game tonight on ESPN like normal. But you've got Kentucky, Florida on ESPN at 7. And then you've got Carolina, Notre Dame at 9 on ESPN. All these teams are unranked. All these teams are, besides Kentucky right now, is playing a little better, are bad. But these two games are on ESPN because Carolina and Kentucky are brands. It's just the way it is. So they scheduled them based on the fact that it's Kentucky, Carolina, and they thought they were going to be good in the preseason. I just disagree with this scheduling method. You should schedule games based on how these teams start to perform. So these teams are struggling right now. These games don't deserve to be on ESPN. Find another game that's better to put on ESPN instead, a week or two in advance. That's how it should be done. Football does this because if you have a team struggling, they'll start putting it on SEC Network or Big Ten Network more often as the season goes along, whatever conference you're in. More that they do it more as the season goes along because they have evidence of what you are or what you're doing as a team. You start to fade, they stop doing it. That's why they schedule the games 2 or 3 weeks in advance. I like that method a lot better than scheduling it from the preseason because when you do that, then you lock these games in to the point where you're putting your best games on bad networks. Kansas State was on ESPN Plus a couple weeks ago, and Kentucky Ole Miss was on ESPN, and Indiana Maryland was on ESPN too. It should have been Kansas State on ESPN. And then it should have been Indiana, Maryland on ESPN too. And then since you don't put SEC games on ESPN Plus, you do put Big 12 games, then you should have had Kentucky, Ole Miss on ESPNU or SEC Network. That's how it should be. But that's not how it works. They just go ahead and schedule it. So, and I think there was a game last year in the USFL that was a really good game. And don't you remember? I think they had it on like USA Network, and they actually ended up putting it on Fox or NBC. Because it was a good game. They had to rework the schedule. It was one game last year where they reworked the schedule around to make it work because they knew it was a good game that deserved to be on TV. But that's your problem when you lock the schedule in. You shouldn't do that because of the fact you make it where you a lot more difficult on yourself to have to change it later when all you have to do is wait 2 weeks in advance, see how the teams are doing, and then schedule the games. That's how you should do it.
Absolutely. All right, so to close this puppy out. Well, we don't need the thing for this last one anyway. So to close this puppy out, last topic is, I don't know where it went, is the Case Cookus re-signing with the Philadelphia Stars.
I think it's awesome. I mean, he was really good last year. I mean, he wasn't even the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season for Philadelphia last year. I forgot who it was.
Brian Scott.
There you go. Brian Scott. He actually was pretty good. I mean, he wasn't terrible himself, but he got hurt, if I remember. Yeah. And then Case Cookus came in, and, man, he was cooking. I know people have used that, cliche over and over again to talk about him, but he was really good last year for Philadelphia. I'm just surprised that, he's didn't really – move up per se. I don't know if he got a shot in the NFL this offseason or not. He might have. I can't remember, but he deserves a shot because he played really well. And if he keeps playing like he is going to get a shot in the NFL eventually. It's just so many good quarterbacks. It's tough to fit them all. But it's great for the Stars because he's really good, and it makes them automatically one of the best teams in the USFL this upcoming season. I know we talked about Philadelphia's draft selections, that it wasn't really, any player popping off the page for them, but re-signing Case Cookus is your headline. And as long as you have a really solid team around him, even if it's a bunch of players you don't really even know about, then I think they should be fine.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely love this. I mean, he he had a Tom Brady-like story. Wasn't the starter to begin with. Starter gets hurt and goes down. It's questionable how long he's going to be out. And leads with Brian Scott out, Case Cookus leads Philadelphia to the USFL championship. And in my opinion, if a couple of things go either way, they probably win. It would have been the perfect story for sure to have Philadelphia win, but things didn't happen for them to do it. I think he's a great player. He definitely, if he did get NFL shot over the offseason, that's wonderful. That's awesome. If he didn't, come on, NFL, what are you doing? The guy deserves a shot for sure. So, I mean, without a doubt, great signing. I think it's going to help the team feel like, oh, no, we're not feel like, oh, no, we're starting over, 100% over. Overall, I just think he fits in the system great, and I think it's just overall a great fit for him.
I do too. It's just a great decision. Since he's still available, to play for you, then it's great to bring him back because you had a great season with him last year. No reason not to bring him back and have more success until eventually someone is smart enough to take him. I mean, in the NFL, as long as he's available, just keep re-signing him, Philadelphia. That's what I would do. I mean, because like you said, he fits the system. He's going to win you games. It's going to be a lot of fun for Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Unscripted. We hope everybody that popped in enjoyed. Thank you for the interactions this week. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you next week, and we hope to see you. If you're a subscriber of me, I hope to see you the rest of the week on my shows coming out. And if you're a subscriber of Jeffrey's, we hope that we see you over on Young Guns for tomorrow night. We don't know what we're talking about yet, which we're going to have to get that settled from now on. But, yeah. So we'll see you next time, whenever that may be. And stay tuned to the channels because I'm sure Jeffrey's got some awesome stuff getting ready to come out soon, and I got some awesome stuff getting ready to come out. So, yeah. See you next time, everybody.